Rohan always believed that fear was something other people talked about. He thought fear was for weak moments, for children hiding under blankets, not for someone like him who had grown up hearing that a man must be strong. Yet every night, when the house fell silent and the lights went out, fear visited him like an uninvited guest. Rohan lived in a small town where everyone knew everyone else. He worked in a local printing shop, arranging papers, fixing machines, doing the same tasks every day. From the outside, his life looked calm and settled, but inside him lived a storm he never shared with anyone. He was afraid of speaking in front of people. Even the thought of standing up and saying a few words made his heart race. His palms sweat, and his throat tighten as if someone had tied a knot inside it. This fear followed him everywhere. At work, when his boss asked for ideas, Rohan kept his eyes down. At family gatherings, when relatives asked him about his future, he smiled politely and changed the topic. Many times, he had ideas that could help the shop grow, but they stayed locked inside his mind because fear guarded the door. One evening, the shop owner announced something that changed everything. A big client was coming from the city, and someone from the staff would have to present their services and plans. The owner looked around the room and said he wanted Rohan to do it. Rohan felt the ground slip under his feet. His ears buzzed, and for a moment he thought he might faint. He wanted to say no. 100 excuses rushed to his lips, but before he could stop himself, the owner smiled and said, "I've seen how carefully you work. I trust you." Those words stayed with Rohan long after he left the shop. That night, he couldn't sleep. His fear grew louder, whispering that he would fail, that people would laugh, that he would embarrass himself. He imagined standing there, forgetting his words, his voice shaking. His fear painted every possible bad ending in bright colors. The next morning, Rohan visited his old school teacher, Mr. Sharma. The teacher had retired but still lived in the same modest house, surrounded by books and plants. Rohan respected him deeply, not just for his knowledge but for the calm way he looked at life. When Rohan shared his fear, his voice cracked with emotion. Mr. Sharma listened quietly, without interrupting. When Rohan finished, the teacher smiled gently and said, "Fear is not your enemy. Running from it is." Rohan looked confused. "But fear stops me," he said. "It makes me weak." Mr. Sharma shook his head. "Fear is a signal. It tells you that something matters. If you didn't care, you wouldn't be afraid. The real problem is that you believe fear means stop. Sometimes, it means grow." The teacher told Rohan a simple story about a boy who was afraid of water but dreamed of crossing a river. Every day, the boy stood at the riverbank, watching others cross. One day he stepped into the water, just a little. The water was cold and scary, but it didn't drown him. The next day, he went a little deeper. Over time, the river stopped being a monster and became just water. You don't defeat fear in one jump, Mr. Sharma said. You defeat it in small steps. Rohan went home with those words echoing in his mind. For the first time, he didn't try to push fear away. Instead, he sat with it. He wrote down what exactly he was afraid of. He realized that he wasn't afraid of speaking. He was afraid of being judged, afraid of making mistakes, afraid of not being enough. He decided to take small steps. The next day at work, when his boss asked a simple question, Rohan answered, even though his voice trembled. No one laughed. No one shouted. The world didn't end. That small success gave him a tiny spark of courage. At home, he practiced speaking out loud in front of a mirror. He hated the sound of his own voice at first, but slowly, it became familiar. Sometimes he stumbled, sometimes he forgot his words, but he reminded himself that this was practice, not the final moment. Days passed, and the day of the presentation came closer. Fear still lived inside him, but it had changed. It was no longer a giant shadow, it was more like a nervous companion. Walking beside him, on the morning of the presentation, Rohan stood outside the shop, taking deep breaths. His hands were cold, and his stomach felt tight. He remembered Mr. Sharma's words and told himself, fear means this matters. When the client arrived, the shop filled with quiet tension. Rohan stood in front of the small group. His heart pounded so loudly he was sure everyone could hear it. For a brief second, fear screamed at him to run. Then he took a breath and started speaking. His voice shook at first, but he kept going. He talked about the shop's work, its values, and its plans. He focused on one sentence at a time, not the whole speech. He noticed people nodding. He noticed that they were listening, not judging. In the middle of his talk, he forgot a line. His mind went blank. Fear rushed back, laughing at him. But instead of freezing, Rohan paused, smiled slightly, and continued in his own words. Something surprising happened. He felt lighter, free. When he finished, there was a moment of silence, and then the client smiled and thanked him. The owner of the shop patted Rohan's shoulder with pride. In that moment, Rohan realized something powerful. He hadn't been fearless. He had been brave. That evening, as he walked home under the soft orange sky, Rohan felt different. Not because his life had suddenly changed, but because he had changed how he faced fear. He understood that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. Days later, Rohan visited Mr. Sharma again. This time, his smile was wide and confident. He thanked the teacher and shared what had happened. Mr. Sharma listened and said, "Remember this feeling. Fear will come back in new forms. When it does, don't fight it. Walk with it." Rohan nodded. He knew fear would return. Life would bring new challenges, new unknowns. But now, he had learned a lesson that would stay with him forever. Fear was not a wall meant to stop him. It was a door, waiting for him to open it. From that day on, Rohan didn't become perfect. He still felt afraid sometimes. But he stopped letting fear decide his limits. He started speaking up more at work, sharing ideas, taking chances. Slowly, his world grew bigger. And every time fear whispered that he couldn't do something, Rohan smiled softly and took one small step forward, knowing that on the other side of fear was a stronger version of himself.